For any artistic endeavor, there are a couple of factors that can make any project significantly more difficult. Usually, these are things such as time constraints, or a lack of creative freedom and budgetary limitations. Each one of these can make a film, novel, painting, or even, yes, a video game significantly more difficult to create, or at the very least, release in a quality state. Now, each one of these can exist for very significant reasons. Sometimes there's a real doubt as to whether or not a project will be able to create a return on investment, so managers keep budgets very low and avoid taking excessive risks. Sometimes, when licensing an intellectual property, there is reason to believe that the licensee will take too many liberties or will undo all of the progress that was made over the years and years of work by the originator. As a result, the creator will often place serious restrictions on what is and isn't allowed within their IP and will strictly supervise everything going on with the project throughout its lifespan. And lastly, sometimes with a licensed property, the title holder will have several games lined up down the pipeline. They're only licensing the IP out because there's a lot of money on the table. Think of what happened with Warner Brothers and Arkham Origins. According to the developers, the only reason that game was made was to cash grab the money that was left on the table between Rocksteady releases. Seriously, I'm not joking, look it up. They openly say that. Now, when this type of thing happens, you'll see the party that owns the license place strict schedules down, stating that the game has to be done and released by X date, otherwise the project will be abandoned, because it might step on the toes of the next official entry. Now, if you've been listening carefully, you'll notice that all three of these examples of difficulties that can be placed on a company while developing a game, all of them are related. They weren't just random selections from my vast, expansive catalog of complaints, believe it or not. That's right, all of these were at play with Fallout New Vegas. Now, I love New Vegas more than Brick loves lamp.
I love lamp. I love lamp.
And if you've followed this channel for a while, you'll know that. I did a critique of the game, and it was actually responsible for introducing me to the beauty of open world RPGs. Now, this isn't a video on how much I love New Vegas or how it shaped my gaming tastes and preferences, but I do want you to know this moving forward because I'm a transparent YouTuber who cares about my viewers. I mean, it's also because I started typing this sentence out and didn't want to erase anything. I mean, I do care about you guys. I'm just saying that this part of the video is here because I'm lazy and, you know, this is a tangent. New Vegas had a lot going against it. Now, I've done a lot of digging and I've tried to find out whose idea it was to license the game out from under Bethesda's nose. I've watched a ton of interviews and read a lot of them too. The thing is, Bethesda Game Studio execs and producers get really weird whenever New Vegas is brought up. It's really weird, actually. It's like when you run into somebody from years and years ago and you know that their old friend just made it big in Hollywood, so you ask them, "How's Jason?" and they don't want to talk about it because deep down they know that they're a failure in comparison. Yeah, I know that analogy was a stretch, but you get what I mean. Oh, and in case you were wondering, I was actually talking about a real person. I was talking about Jason Momoa, you know, Khal Drogo and Mr. Sexy Pants. He lived here in Fort Collins, where I live in Colorado, a few years before he made it big. He literally lived like 450 feet from where I am currently recording this video, and he waited tables at Bassetti's, which is an Italian restaurant in Old Town Fort Collins that just closed down last fall, so yeah. Damn it, there I go again on another tangent. New Vegas is the black sheep of the Fallout family, not because it did anything wrong, but rather because it did so much right. But soon after, the head honchos at Bethesda Game Studios' parent company ZeniMax determined that because it was going to be 7 years between Fallout releases, they would try to capitalize on the popularity of the franchise by licensing the game out to another studio, Obsidian Entertainment, a prominent developer of RPGs that was facing some hard financial times and was eager to work on the project. The crazy thing about this is that they were given the money up front to pay their employees and get the game out. But they were only given 18 months to develop the game, start to finish. Everything from the writing to coding to voice acting to polish had to take place in this short time frame. Just contrast that with the roughly 4 years that Bethesda spent on Fallout 3. Now, they did have some help. The engine, for instance, was just copied over from Fallout 3 as it was deemed to be good enough for Fallout New Vegas, but they didn't shorten or limit the scope of the project due to this time constraint. They had a limited time frame, ZeniMax and BGS breathing down their backs, and beyond all of this, their budget was highly constrained as well. Yet, despite all of this, they decided to go bigger than anyone thought possible or even reasonable. Instead of making their outline small and easily achievable within these constraints, they made everything bigger. There are more characters, more factions, more endings than Fallout 3, and there are even over 65,000 lines of dialogue in New Vegas compared to the roughly 40,000 that were in Fallout 3. They refined the inventory system, the rendering system to allow for broader color, new assets specific to the Mojave, and they apparently even had to tweak the way that the engine handled multiple lighting sources because the New Vegas Strip was so bright and had so many lights that the old engine wasn't able to properly handle it. The point is, this is where you can see the type of developers that worked at Obsidian at this time in history. They didn't take the easy route, the safe route, or even, by some accounts, the smart route. Rather, they took the one that they knew was going to create the best game at the end of the day for players. But this overambition would come back to bite them after release, which is what we're going to talk about next. You see, in the gaming industry, when licensing an IP, it's common to set a bar that the developers should shoot for, usually a review score average, for instance. And ZeniMax did just that with New Vegas. They told Obsidian that they would pay them one flat sum for developing the game, and any extra royalties or bonuses would only be paid out to the studio if the game that they developed received over an 85 on Metacritic. If they failed to get the score, they would only get the initial payment, and all royalties and extra sales revenue would go directly to Bethesda and ZeniMax. Now, needless to say, Obsidian really needed those royalties. They were a decently sized studio by the end of the project and needed some form of sustained income to keep everybody employed. And, well, as the story goes, the game launched on October 19th, 2010, and by November 8th, just a few weeks after they launched, they had sold over 5 million copies. That is insane. Players loved the game and couldn't get enough of it, but Metacritic scores are not determined by players, but rather by journalists. And, well, the journalists had some issues with the game. Remember when I said that their overambition was going to come back to bite them? Well, it did. All of New Vegas's problems can be surmised with one word: Khaleesi. No, I'm just kidding. I wanted to get her in the video somehow, and this is the only way I could think of. So, yeah. No, she's a dragon. That's all. Anyway, the actual problem they had actually had to do with something that Khaleesi eats. Bugs. I don't think that was a stretch at all. Obsidian had pushed so hard, giggity, for the game to be expansive that the engine had become stretched far too thin, and it actually couldn't keep up with their ambition, something that will make perfect sense if you played any Bethesda Game Studios game that's used this same engine. Reports of game-breaking bugs came in within hours of the game launching. People were reporting corrupted save files, clipping into and through the map, broken quests, items that didn't load, dialogue that wouldn't play, animations that were broken, areas of the map that weren't rendering correctly. The list just goes on and on. Furthermore, the PlayStation 3 version of the game was basically unplayable in the late game because of a save file problem with the engine. Basically, the longer somebody played, the longer the save file would become, and because the engine, for whatever reason, would inversely correlate its frame rate to the length of the save file, basically what happened is that the frame rate would start to tank. After 40 hours of play, for instance, your frame rate would be in the single digits, and there was literally nothing that you could do. And as far as I can find in my research for this video, there was never a patch that directly addressed this problem. Apparently because it's a significant engine issue. The game was just flat out broken on PlayStation 3. Now, patches did come and the experience did get better for most players, and because the game at the core was so good, players were willing to overlook a lot of the issues and just focused on the positives, which is why by 2015, Fallout New Vegas had actually sold 11.6 million copies worldwide. However, reviewers were reviewing the game as it was on launch day, which in their defense was actually pretty poor and is by definition their job. But even with that in mind, the game actually scored pretty well, and most reviewers actually recommended the game with the major caveat of technical issues. For instance, Eurogamer's review stated, quote, "Obsidian has created a totally compelling world, and its frustrations pale into insignificance compared to the immersive, obsessive experience on offer. Just like the scorched scenery that provides its epic backdrop, New Vegas is huge and sprawling, sometimes gaudy, even downright ugly at times, but always effortlessly, shamelessly entertaining." End quote. And they gave it a 9 out of 10. But despite all of those people that loved the game underneath the bugs, I'm sure you saw this coming, they scored an 84 on Metacritic, 1 point away from the needed score of 85. As a result, their contract was not fulfilled, and they did not receive an extra slice of the over $300 million in revenue that was generated just in the first 3 weeks of the game's release. Obsidian went along, trying to sign deals with Microsoft in 2011, but the deal would inevitably fail and the studio would be forced to lay off over 30 people in 2012. Now, it's not all sad news. Microsoft recently went back to Obsidian and bought them out, securing everybody's jobs and their creative freedom. And in fact, their next release is fast approaching, and it looks to be a doozy. But more specifically, the point of this video is to celebrate the game and remember just how fantastic it really is. Despite all of the horrific bugs, the time constraints, the budget constraints, the owning studio breathing down their necks, and many other difficulties, Obsidian was able to release a game that people are still playing to this day, and that many players considered to be one of the best RPGs ever released. They did some incredible work with literally everything going against them, and they created a game that many cherish to this day, going on 10 years after it launched. Where a lesser studio would have taken the road more traveled, they turned and chose to embrace the difficulties, expectations, and the pressures. They didn't settle for mediocre or even average, but rather they chased exceptionalism. And you know what? That's just what they achieved. Exceptionalism. Without a doubt, Fallout New Vegas did something incredible. That's all for me. Thank you so much for watching. I love you all more than you could possibly know. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit like and subscribe for new content like this every single week. Thank you for watching. I love you all, and I'll see you in the next video.